I wanted to get started with an easy question. What keeps you up at night? Because depending on who you listen to, it's either the greatest time to be in radio news or the worst time to be in news totally. I happen to think it's one of the greatest times because the hunger for information is actually greater than I've ever seen it before. And remember, I'm coming from a classroom where young people are hungry for information. The question is, how do you get them to listen to your brand? So you want to try, Ben?
I know, you're sleeping at night, Dan. I know why. Listen, the short answer is, and you're right. I also think it is, both the best of times and the most challenging of times. I don't know if hardest, but certainly the most challenging. And if I said this, people would say, okay, you said that. Honestly, everything. But in a good way and in a challenging way. I worry all the time when you're in the whole news business about, first and foremost, because we can ruin a reputation in less than 5 minutes that we're going to get sued for something. And even if you win the case, because the person who's suing you was incorrect, it costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend the case. And so you don't want to even have the whiff of that. So that keeps me up at night. Are we being fair to everybody? If somebody's accusing somebody, are we providing both sides? But the thing that really keeps me up in a good way is trying to reinvent, trying to innovate, trying to find new ways, trying to attract the audience we're trying to attract, well, not losing the audience that we have. And I sit there with a recorder sometimes, and I just sort of spew into there just things that make sense, things that don't make sense, but things that I know at some point I may want to revisit or have a conversation with my people about to see if there's something there. And I just spent 6 weeks at the radio station going over from start to finish, every single element of the radio station. I do that every summer. And I'm glad it's done, but I think every brand manager should do it because no matter how much you think you know your brand, when you go through everything that you're doing at every level, the talent, the commercials, you name it, that's how you innovate, and that's how you change, and that's how you do it.
And I want to get back to some of those content points in a couple of minutes because I think those are really good conversation starters. Who wants to tackle what keeps you up at night? You were just bought by a brand new company. That would be both exciting and very nerve-wracking, I guess, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of change. We don't know what's to come. And I would say the thing that keeps me up at night is how to be better storytellers. Because CBS News can take heat for sounding imbalanced, right? And I'll go back and listen to the newscast and I don't necessarily hear it, but it involves a bigger discussion about, how I think the radio news business is changing a little. People will get the headlines on their phone, but are we giving the right context, the most authentic, genuine? President Trump has wins. Are we leaning in and explaining those wins and what those wins will mean? Are we doing that with the same care and balance when we're being critical? Those are the things that are kind of keeping me up, and like, how do we tell the story better in a fresher way so that people don't disengage? Because it's a lot coming at us at once. It's a lot of change right now happening, and change is generally good, but the transition through it all could be really hard.
And I hope you don't mind if I just make a quick mention when you say CBS News and storytellers. Today was the memorial service for one of the great CBS News storytellers, Mark Knoller, a great New Yorker, a great friend to a couple of us here on stage, and really the epitome of someone who sits there and works harder than anyone else and comes up with some of the most unique storylines than anybody else. So condolences to the CBS family, and we're honored that you're here today. You want to take it, Julia?
Sure. I would add to what these guys said. It's getting it right. I think that, and doing right by our listeners as well. Making sure that, everything we cover today is so nuanced. I was just, on the train ride up here this morning, I was having a conversation with our digital news director about whether or not a headline on our story about what the DC mayor is doing in DC and how she, is she or is she not working with President Trump? Is this an extension of the surge? What do we call it? All these things. And words matter, and they matter today more than ever. And people are listening, and people will call us, they will email us, and they will keep us in check, which I really, really appreciate. But that's what keeps me up at night, is definitely getting it right. And I'm okay that keeps me up at night. I think that is, that is what I should care about. is getting it right. That is my duty and my responsibility in the role that I sit in. And I think that a lot of people in my newsroom would say the same thing, that that is the thing that for them is most important every day when they come into work.
You're up, Michael.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I would just add the 24-hour news cycle, which has become a 25-hour news cycle, I think, is just constant. And, you know, we provide reports for WTOP, for WINS, and other stations like them around the country. And, you know, we want to be up to date with everything that we do, the tariff this, tariff that, Fed this, Fed that. And it can happen when I'm sleeping or not sleeping, depending on the evening.
You're 4 big news brands, but you're individual news brands. So my question is, what content gets top billing for you and your brand, and how does it define your brand? How is your brand defined? That's the first set of conversations, because then I'm going to ask you about how do you get your people in your newsroom to make sure that they follow that road. How do you define your brand? Who wants to take it up?
Well, I would just say that I think for me, when it comes to the content that we put on WTOP, I say to everybody in the newsroom, all of my producers, my on-air talent, we have to have a balanced news diet every single hour. It cannot be all death, doom, gloom, politics, destruction, all of that. That is not what people want to hear. They will turn us off. And also, I think Glenn Beck, for those of you who were in the room earlier, Glenn Beck said this too, he's not one-dimensional, right? So someone can be interested in politics and want to know what's going on there, but they can also be interested in what our feature reporter, Matt Koufax, has to say about a new, Greek ice cream shop that's opening up down the street, or whatever, or the mullet madness competition that he just won, a national Murrow for, right? So that to me is what I think of when I think of content. We have to make sure that that content is well-rounded, because that is what our listeners want, and also not just our listeners, but those people who are viewing us on social media, on YouTube, on our website, all of that as well.
And one of the top stories on your station today, when I was driving in because I was streaming it, was the police are getting a 10.5% raise. I want to be a cop in D.C. What were they paid before they were gotten a 10.5% raise? What defines content, Ben, on 1010 Wins?
It's the city.
Yeah.
I think all of us, strive to reflect the city that we serve, and serving DC is different than serving, what's news in New York. And I think, I was told very long time ago when I started in the business, if you took somebody from outer space and you blindfolded them or whatever, but they, and you dropped them into the city, they should know if you put the radio on within just a couple of minutes what city they're in based on how you're programming your radio station. And New York has some very unique qualities to it. It's in your face, it's fast paced, it's don't waste my time, it's get out of my way, it's quirky, it's very parochial, it's all those things that make New York, and Wins, reflects that. And so do the others, the other radio stations. I know I saw Sid here a little bit earlier. I don't know if he's still here, but he reflects the city. I mean, he took WABC mornings from nothing to top of the heap, and it's because he reflects the city. He is in your face, no nonsense. He's got an opinion about everything. All good. We are that without the opinion.
A little harder for the networks to define, don't you think, or is it not, Jen?
It is. Am I louder than everyone? Didn't we just have this discussion about being too loud? Let me put away my big voice. So it is hard because ultimately it has to be valuable to the listener, because why are you going as a station or an affiliate, give us your time, right? So your listener has to be just as engaged, and we have to think about all the stations that take us, and sometimes we are always thinking about WTOP or the biggies, and sometimes I have to remind them, like, Middle America doesn't give a shit about Broadway right now, prices are up. And not that I say that, but because we have such little time, what are we discussing? And is it understandable? Is it relatable? Is it, and I think when you say the rounded plate, I do think about like consumer stories, weather stories, and like, why is it significant? Also being able to like take the 30-foot view about why this story is important. I think that network radio, what it does really well is get you familiar with big pop culture ideas. I mean, Americans have never known this much about our immigration system until now. They haven't cared before the way they do right now, and that's because it's in the news and we're explaining what's happening, you know, and what happened in LA, you know, what is gonna potentially be different in Chicago or Baltimore. I think that that's what network news does, is allows you to have a conversation with the cab driver in New York and be on the same page no matter where you are. Community in radio is super important. New York radio, great example, but let me not get all emotional about radio. Not yet. I'll wait.
Well, but Julia's right, you know, it's story selection and storytelling. And if you can get those two things, you're 98% of the way to where you need to be. But that nuance of story selection and storytelling is not as easy as it sounds, because everybody has an opinion. It's very subjective, and what's important to one person may be irrelevant to another. And the art of what we do is story selection and storytelling.
To your question about networks, it's a little different because we have two customers. We've got the affiliates. Ben is my customer, right? Up there somewhere, Ken is my customer, and many other customers, like
Hey,
yourself,
Ken.
Julie. So what's our brand for that? To me, it's customer service. They know that 24 hours a day, they can call my cell phone, and I'm gonna answer it, and I'm actually gonna, you know, be responsive. So I'm very sensitive to make sure that everybody understands that, because without affiliates, we don't have a network. And the other customer is, similar to what you were saying, the listener, right? And the listener is paying us with the most important commodity in existence, time, their time. So even if we're doing a 1-minute report that's heard on WINS and WTOP and WSB and everywhere else, we want that report to be so gripping that it's the highlight of the hour, not the tune-out of the hour. And you remember, Tim, what was it, like 15 years ago when Dow Jones decided it was getting out of the radio business, and we came down to Hudson Square and pitched, oh, you should use Bloomberg. And I knew the one thing I'd be up against is that, oh, Bloomberg, they're wonky, they're boring, they ruin our radio stations and everything. And so our whole pitch was, no, we're radio guys, we get it. And you know, that's what we try to live up to 15 years later every day, making every second, as you said, every second has to count.
So you're radio guys and gals living in a digital world. Ben, you and I have had this conversation many, many times. How concerned are you about some of the things that you're delivering that people can get on their phone, like traffic? Why do I need WINS for traffic every 10 minutes when I can look on my phone and get it?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that I bring to the table, there are a lot of things I don't bring to the table. One of the things I think I bring is I can listen to my radio station as a listener. I'm not always in program director mode. So having that skill set, having that ability to do that, I use the radio like my listeners. So I have Waze on my dashboard, but I also have WINS on for the traffic, because I don't trust either one enough to ignore one over the other, right? And so I think the coexistence is the goal, not the elimination, not the, I would never go on the air and tell people that Waze is awful, because people won't believe me, because so many people use Waze or whatever, you know, map they use. So it's not my job to go on and tell them why they should be listening to me over another thing, because that's just not, it doesn't match the way they're living their lives. And so listening to the radio station as a regular listener, I sort of look that way. And I use social media. We changed our entire social media strategy about 8 months ago, 6 or 8 months ago, from the, you know, again, I call it traditional changes every year, but from the traditional, you know, the website and the articles and the, you know, click here for the audio. And we went, and we still do that, but we're all in now on the social platforms. And how do we develop that? And how do we grow that? And how do we learn from that? And in the last 8 months, we went from a couple of thousand, I mean 10,000 on Instagram and a couple of people here or there, you know, in the thousands. In the last month, we hit 30 million. And it's because we, one, weren't afraid to innovate, weren't afraid to take the chance. What's the worst that could happen? And now it's actually a viable business model. And so we use it for, you know, for those, so I'm all in on it.
Let me pivot a bit and talk about the newsrooms, the modern newsrooms today. How do you how do you operate with the older generation and the newer generation? Do younger people operate differently in a newsroom than the older people, and how do you get it to work together?
Well, I always tell anyone who is joining the WTOP team, if there's someone that's been in the industry for a long time, I tell them that TOP is what I call a teaching newsroom, like a teaching hospital, a teaching newsroom. And if you come in, I expect that part of your job is mentoring that next generation of, newsroom employee. But what's great is that the folks who have been around for forever are also learning from those new kids on the block, right? They're coming in and they have the social media skills. They know how to make a video. And I can't tell you how many of the staffers who have been around for a while come to me and say, hey, can we do a, so-and-so, maybe someone who's been around for a few years. They're really great on social media. I would love to, do a teaching session with them. Could you set something up where 5 of us can get in a room and they can show me how they create that video on their phone. I want to be able to do that too. And so it goes both ways. And I think that's really, really cool.
Anybody else want to tackle the older versus the younger? I mean, CBS, Jen, people walk in there and they're like, oh my God, Walter Cronkite walked through these hallways and worked in these newsrooms.
I thought he was still there for a second.
He's the next panel.
Or the younger ones say, who's Walter Cronkite?
Right, exactly.
Funny Walter Cronkite story, they moved us out of our newsroom, and sitting there, someone decided to take I don't want to say chainsaw, but I believe chainsaw, to try to take out some of the map out of the wall, Cronkite's map, which was like glued on the wall. Yeah. Anyway, so what was the question? I told you I was going to do that. Sorry.
Is Walter Cronkite still alive?
He is not.
Go.
He is not.
Is the map still there?
Most of it is, yes.
Okay.
So we recently had one of our senior writers, the gentleman who produced World News Roundup, retire. Paul Ferry, right, who is an excellent journalist and storyteller and always learning.
Yeah.
So before he was going to go, I decided the desk associates are going to maybe train with him a bit, because there's a lot of knowledge there. He is a teacher. He taught college level. So I could imagine when people first saw that schedule, they're like, what is she doing? But I just felt like time is of the essence. I'm sorry if you're offended or you don't understand, but time is of the essence, and he's with us, and I learned so much from him.
Ben, what do you think of that question? Do younger journalists operate differently? And how are you adapting with that in your newsroom?
Yeah, it's probably the top 3 challenges I face in my newsroom. We're bringing in all young people, fresh energy, fresh perspective, lots of things to teach them, but their perspective is so wildly different than the folks who have been in the newsroom for decades. And there's so much so that I spend a lot of my time just patrolling the newsroom to make sure the conversations, as I hear them start to rise a little bit, to make sure that I'm there to push it back down. Everybody can have their opinions, but when it starts to permeate the newsroom and it becomes a thing in the newsroom, it's a problem, because it then tends to spill over into everything. And it can be everything from what's going on between Israel and Hamas, and young folks thinking that phrases like "from the river to the sea" is just a slogan, to the older generation who knows the origin of that particular phrase. Yeah. And that's it. They're off to the races, and they're having, then everybody's mad at each other, and it's almost everything. It's the election in New York City with the mayor, the young folks, and it's like, I don't know enough yet. I don't think any of us know enough yet about, Mamdani, but what we know, the young people are 1,000% on board. They're campaigning for him. They're doing whatever it takes. Fine, good, that's great. And the older folks in my newsroom are scared to death of Mamdani becoming the mayor. And when you put all of that into the mix on a daily basis, and the stories we cover on a daily basis that cover those things, it is very difficult, very difficult.
And I would just add, I think it's a delicate balance, right? Because I always say, you want the conversations to happen in the newsroom that are news conversations. Like, we have to have a lot of just verbal communication, because there is a lot of nuance in the topics that we're covering. And so I want and encourage conversation to happen in the newsroom about topics. I want people to ask why, or why not, or things like that. But you have to be careful, like you said, that it doesn't, that conversation about news and news judgment and how we cover the news doesn't spill over into all of a sudden everyone's voicing their opinion on a topic. That's what we have to police.
Can I ask quick if any of you have made any changes to your programming based on the Nielsen change and the 3-minute measurement? Have you done anything differently? And if you have you felt an impact?
It helps a short duration radio station like Wins for sure, because people come in and go out all the time. So the 3 minutes it's been very helpful for us. I did move some commercial inventory into different positions on the clock. The Nielsen before, when it was the 5-minute rule, everybody moved their commercials to around 15 and 45, what they call the bow tie. Under this particular way, I have a better chance now, because you don't have to get to exactly 3 minutes in Nielsen, you have to get close to 3 minutes to get the credit. And so putting them at the 15 and the 45 doesn't make sense anymore, because now I have a really good shot at getting 3 minutes and 2/4 hours. And so, yeah, I've made some definite changes to that. And my teasing, I do some teasing. The problem with teasing is, I don't know if you run into this, is some people are great at it and some people suck at it. And you just never know what you're gonna get when you put the radio on. However, from a 3-minute perspective, I tease now right before my traffic reports twice an hour, because I know hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands at any given time are coming in for the traffic. And they might get there a minute or two early, but they're gonna leave when traffic is over, because some people just use us for traffic. But if I tease right before the traffic report, and it's a good tease, and that's a crapshoot, but it's a good tease, and I can hold them after the traffic just for that story, I've got my 3 minutes.
I don't program to Nielsen.
I just want to say, I love how you program, and if anybody listens for a full hour, it's fascinating.
Thanks.
I don't program to Nielsen. I program to the listener and what I think sounds good to the listener. And we've made a lot of little tweaks over the past few years here and there to give the listener a better experience, to make sure that when we do go to commercial break, it's not too long, that we can keep them around with a good tease, hopefully. We take a page out of TV's book and we'll say, back in 30 seconds. Like, well, because, maybe that will make someone stick around. Oh, it's only 30 seconds. I know they're telling me up front it's only 30 seconds or a minute versus going into a commercial break. They don't know how long it's going to be until we come back to programming. So we've made a lot of little tweaks like that, but I'm always thinking when it comes to programming about the listener first and what they need.
Michael, you were saying that, I'm thinking that, well, a network doesn't have to worry about the Nielsen changes, but you said no.
Well, we're kind of both, because our local radio station in New York drives the network, the 24-hour network, WBBR. And in fact, we did move the commercial breaks a little later, like instead of, I think, 14 down to 18, that kind of thing, to get those 2/4 hours. So that change was made. Yeah.
We're kind of living in an era of an erosion of trust in the media, and I know that it has touched all forms of news media, including radio news. So even big brands, even all of your brands, have been touched by people who question what they hear. And I'm wondering whether you have done anything differently over the past year or more to try and fight that. Some people say, show them more of the sausage and how it's made. Tell me more about the news you're covering and how you got it, and people will, buy into it. Anybody want to tackle that?
Well, it's a core philosophy that I've always had that I think builds your trust and credibility. If we screw up, we admit it on the air.
Yeah.
The first thing, it's like when I first got there as news director, and this is true story, first weekend as news director at WINS, and I got a call from our editor, and what apparently had happened was we went on the air and we said that former Vice President Walter Mondale had died. And we got a call from the CNN newsroom from a producer who said, oh my God, we just heard you because we have you on in the newsroom. We will go with that, we'll credit you, but where did you get that information? And the editor said, what are you talking about? He said, you just had that the former vice president died, Walter Mondale. He goes, hold on a second. Pushes the button to the anchor and says, who'd you just kill? And the anchor says, former vice president Walter Mondale. Why? He says, because it was Walter Matthau, you idiot. And the editor then asked me, what should we do? Just go on, right? We'll just ignore it, because then people who missed it will never know. And I said, no, you're gonna go right back on the air and you're gonna say, we regret what we did. we killed the vice president, we meant to kill the actor. We apologize for it. And I think in that instant, not only did it send a signal to our listeners, but also to the newsroom that we're human and we're going to screw up. And if you acknowledge that, people will trust you more. And that's.
And I was,
Who'd you kill?
well, I was just going to say, we also have a policy, you know, we've got an email line, we have a tip line. And I think a lot of times people think that those kind of tip lines go like to a black hole and no one ever reads them, no one ever listens to them. In fact, they go to probably more people in our newsroom than should get them. Sometimes our feelings are hurt when certain people receive certain emails. But our goal is to respond in a timely manner to every single email and every single phone call we get. And I think that that really, really builds trust. And, you know, sometimes people point things out that we got wrong or they think we got wrong. I love when they send something and they say, oh, you guys never covered this. And I can send a very nice worded email back with a link to a story on our website or a piece of audio from air. But sometimes they're right. Sometimes we did, maybe something was a little nuanced, or maybe we didn't fully give, you know, the big picture or the bigger picture. And we'll admit that. And I think that that builds trust with audiences as well.
So sometimes I get Julie's emails.
Yeah. I forward them to Jennifer. Yes.
Can you, and so same belief that we try to address it right away with the person who's reaching out, and then also with the anchor or the writer. And it's a constant thing because for some reason people think that, for example, you know, RFK, everybody has their opinion, but maybe the story, it doesn't warrant any sort of opinion because it's a health story. How much are we characterizing within the story? Was it necessary? Did it add to the story? Those are the types of questions, you know, you're asking and getting also.
Michael?
We were reporters together a long time ago, and the one thing I was taught at the very beginning is that the test is if someone heard your report or your newscast, could they tell if you were a liberal or a conservative? Could they tell which way you're leaning? Are you pro-Israel? Are you pro-this? Are you pro-that? And, you know, when we would get phone calls in the newsroom years ago, and half of them saying, you were too pro-Israel, you were too anti-Israel, and it was about down the middle, then you know you did something right. And,
But it's even more granular than that. Is Hamas a terrorist group or a militant organization?
Right. So what language do you
I
use?
may have a philosophy in my newsroom for our anchors, but the networks, whatever network, might have, you know, let's just for argument's sake, we call terrorists, but maybe the network reporter is calling them militant. And that, in and of itself, that granular moment is very, very important to a large group of people on both sides of the aisle.
And that's exactly why when I came up on stage, I said I was optimistic about the world that we're living in terms of news coverage, because I know what goes on in your newsrooms. I know the discussions about getting it right, about trying to do it the right way. And I do think that there's, you know, part of it is incumbent on us to show young people, show our work to young people. Because I think young people growing up have no idea that we do that kind of work. I know John Newman is in the audience. One of his talented anchors, Sherry Preston, came into my class at Montclair State, and kids their eyes were wide open when she was explaining just what goes into a 5-minute newscast. You do all that checking of those facts? Yeah, that's what we do for a living. And I think we've lost this level of, you know, showing our work, and so that authenticity. We only have a couple of minutes left. I want to try and tackle two topics. Partnerships. Do any of you have engaged in partnerships over the past year that has helped your brand, whether it's in ratings, revenue, or just content? I give Ben credit because he really aligned with the other radio station in his cluster, The Block. And I think that that relationship really met well. It has created events, content. Would you agree, Ben, that that's a good partnership?
Yeah, you know, for me, to Julie's point about, you know, serve your listeners, right? But you got to go where they are. And one of the things I think that is just missing in a lot of newsrooms today is understanding the macro behavior of your listener. You're not going to change their macro behavior. Unless you're giving away $1 million at the quarter of the hour, if they're going from point A to point B in local radio, and they're not staying in their car for a second longer. So we have to understand their macro behavior, and then we have to sort of fit into that. So we try to expose our brand by aligning with our other radio stations. As far as I know, we're the only local radio station that has a pickleball tournament.
Yeah.
We run a pickleball tournament twice a year. And when we first proposed it, the sales manager essentially walked away from the table and said, "That's insane. We will never sell it. It's news." And I said, "We're going to do it, and we're going to see what's going to happen." Those events, it's been on for 2 years now, has brought in $1 million in revenue. It has exposed our radio station to 30-something-year-olds because it is a tournament. You can come and play for fun, but it's a tournament. And so the really serious pickleball players come, and that's getting into their life and their macro behavior. And so partnerships are with the radio station, but it's with our listeners wherever they're. People who listen to news play contests. People who listen to news go to the movies. People who listen to news listen to Sid. People who listen to news do a lot of things. And so that's, to me, that's the partnership.
Anybody on partnerships?
I would just add, our partnerships help us for sure. No matter what the partnership is, we're always, again, it goes back to what I said earlier, that the listener is at the center of everything we do. So any partnership that we have is, to make their experience with our brand better. And we only have a limited number of resources. So our partners are an extension of our brand and help us maybe reach people that we wouldn't reach otherwise. And I think I said this last year at this summit, but I think the more that we all can work together and not be competitors, the better, the better for the industry as a whole. And so I love when I hear that, whether it be radio stations who may be owned by different companies, or radio stations and television stations in a market, or whatever it might be, are working together with the news consumer, who is the person who benefits at the end of it.
Jen or Michael, on partnerships, anything?
Well, the obvious partnership for me and for CBS is the affiliate. And we do offer extra services to the affiliates to the extent they want it. Remember back when Scott Herman was at CBS, or was it Entercom, or whatever phase we were in then.
As long as the check clears.
That's right. He said, "Oh, you guys are the hidden diamond that we can use," and it's true, because we've got like 2,000 reporters around the world sitting around waiting to be on WINS or on WTOP or whatnot. And for you at CBS, it's the same thing. And it's just a matter of asking. Drew, if you're up there from KRLD, wanted to do something, and we were working something out with that. We do that all the time, and
Drew's working it with all of us. Thank you,
he's
Drew.
working the room.
He was going to be my example. So, wanting to send a reporter to a major story, let's work together to make that happen so this reporter can stay longer and, be there for both of us.
Last question, because we're going to just shut down in a couple of minutes. And thank you for all your good talk. And God, I love your Hokas. That's a great color.
Oh my gosh, they're so comfy.
Yeah, no, I know that, but they stand out. These are new shoes from like first day of school. And
Let's go dance.
killing me.
And I love your tattoo.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
News
We're
fatigue.
picking you apart here in a
Who's-
good way.
And everybody's scared of news fatigue. And how do you battle news
Yes.
fatigue? Yeah, how do you battle that?
We have a lot of news fatigue in our newsroom.
From the worker perspective
And-
or
and
from the
every
listener perspective?
Yeah, every perspective, yeah.
Yes, I've had people leave the business because they just couldn't handle it's like standing on the edge of the beach and you get hit by the wave, and before you can fully catch your breath, you're hit by another wave, and it just keeps coming. People who listen to the radio, they can turn us off. They can walk away. They can go and recharge their batteries and not listen to it and not get caught up in it. We can't. Every day, every hour, it's whatever it is that we're dealing with. And yes, and I changed the entire design of my newsroom to try to lift the morale so that when they come in, it's not a traditional newsroom. It's a pop culture driven. We have a wall of all the movies, TV shows, songs that 1010 Wins has been featured in. We have a gigantic TV that plays the video clips of all those moments where Wins is, part of that. I have Spider-Man up on one of the pillars because he's from Queens. And, you know, and it gives that New York City vibe. So everything matters when it comes to trying to keep up the morale. So from the moment they walk into the door, I do a sing-along Tuesday where I crank a song at 8 o'clock. They get to pick the song. And if you want to see a bunch of insane people, just come on at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday when we're dancing to some song, myself included. That's a treat. And, you know, so those things, because we have to deal with all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it's a 24-hour part.
I tell everybody, take care of yourself and take care of your loved ones. You know, you got to. Don't miss the doctor appointment, please, because you feel like you can't miss the story. Don't miss the vacation. I hope I don't come to a place where I'm pulling people in and out or making, please take care of yourself and the people you love. And sometimes when it's really hard, I just want to remind everybody, like, go home and love the ones you're with, because we're going to come back and do it all again.
Same. I couldn't have said it better. And that's in terms of the news cycle. I think, you know, keeping that balanced news diet throughout the clock every hour, no matter what is going on, also helps internally too. You know, when we can, you know, play Beyonce on the air or something like that, that's nice as well. It just is a little moment, you know. But I agree with every single thing you guys have said. That's happening to us too.
Yeah, at the end of the day, look, everybody's just a human being living their lives. And, you know, I think one of the few good things that came out of the pandemic is the whole possibility of working from home. It's not something we do a lot of, for obvious reasons, we're radio. But, you know, for a network, we are remote to 1010 Wins. We are remote to WTOP. We are remote to every affiliate. And the technology is such that, you know, we can do it, and we've learned the tricks of hanging curtains for acoustics and so forth. So once in a while, if someone has a personal reason and needs to take a day to work but work from home, we do it, and that makes it a little more humane.
Well, I mean, these are 4 tremendous brands that are lucky to have 4 tremendous leaders, and so I thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today, and I wish you continued success, and congratulations to you on your award, and well-deserved. I can hear it from just being here, and I'm a consumer of all of your brands, and I thank you for taking the time and to spend it with us. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.